Hey everyone, welcome back to the workshop. Artisan Pirate here, and in today's fun video, we are going to be talking about the current scroll saw woodworking setup that the Artisan Pirate, likes to use out here in the workshop. Keep in mind, scroll saw woodworking is primarily what I am known for, although I do dabble in other forms of woodworking like laser engraving. Sometimes I'll cut stuff out on the bandsaw, use the router table, especially use the table saw to mill stuff down. But the tool that I still love to use out in the workshop is the scroll saw. It's a very compact tool that doesn't take up a large footprint out in a garage or workshop, and they are capable of creating so many amazing and creative things. Now, I know that laser engravers and CNC machines are getting more and more affordable for people to be able to pick up and have out in their garage or workshops, but me personally, I feel like you have, I guess what I want to say is, a more intimate relationship with the workpiece when you cut it out over on the scroll saw. I know a laser and a CNC machine, or even a 3D printer, let's just say that, are more technical, involved with computer work and taking files to the machine and getting them loaded and everything. They are art forms in their own right, and they are also capable of creating very beautiful and versatile machines. And I'm not knocking them in any way, shape, or form if you out there in the big wide world like to use 3D printers, laser engravers, or CNC machines. But I have always enjoyed just making a beautiful piece of scroll saw woodworking art. This is a beautiful example of a project cut out completely from start to finish over on a scroll saw, just to show what it is capable of. I cut this out with number 5 Ultra Reverse Tooth or Reverse Tooth blades. This is a Kenny Hopkins design, and you can see it has the tropical ship's wheel, and within the wheel you have the sailing ship, the waves, the lighthouse, putting its guiding light out, all encapsulated in this beautiful maritime design. I cut this out, back in 2021. So a really beautiful design. I stack cut and made 2 of those. You guys know that I like to stack cut whenever possible, to also offer some support to some of those fragile areas within the scroll saw work while you are cutting projects out over at the scroll saw. Keep in mind, this is my personal setup. I'm going to take the camera off of the tripod. I've got an angle finder here to show you guys the angle of the scroll saw. I've got a tape measure here to give you guys proper measurements. But as I said, keep in mind, this is what works for me, and I'm just hoping to inspire you guys who might want to try setting your scroll saw up out in your garage or workshop a little bit differently. So I'm going to take the camera off of the mounted tripod, and we are going to go through here, and I'll talk about why everything is where it's at, and then I'll put the camera back on the mounted tripod, and we'll close the video. And here we have the current scroll saw setup that I am using out in the workshop. In this little area here, hopefully in your guys' opinions, I have produced a bunch of beautiful and creative scroll saw woodworking art completely over on the scroll saw, to hopefully show how versatile the tool and machine is for creating beautiful designs. But as you can see, the scroll saw is on an angle. I get a lot of questions about why the scroll saw is on an angle as opposed to it being flat, and that is to help reduce neck and shoulder strain. I do sit down when I'm at the scroll saw. For years I did stand up at the scroll saw, but I did graduate into sit down at the scroll saw, and I picked up this Sears Craftsman work stool. It has a nice backrest, and it does rotate like a computer chair. And one thing I love having is an L-shaped workbench. My grandfather, who taught me woodworking, built all the workbenches in this workshop, so I've had to adapt to the height that he had everything at for his height. Keep in mind, I am 6'2", and all these measurements that I'm about to show you will vary depending on your height, the height that you are as a person and an individual, and also the height of your workbench or scroll saw stand. I know a lot of people have their scroll saws on stands. This one is just sitting on the workbench. But I love having the L-shaped workbench. That way, if I'm cutting out multiples of something and I cut out a small piece, I can quickly pivot over to the workbench and just set it there and go back to the scroll saw without having to keep getting up or getting down. But as you can see, as I said, it is on an angle. But first, if you guys are curious how I get the close-up views in scroll saw project videos I upload on the platform, I use this jig here. It's got a nice heavy metal or cast iron base. It's got this little manipulative gooseneck piece. It's also metal, and I've got a GoPro mount and a 3D printed mount here that accepts the 1/4 20 bolt that holds the camera, and I'm able to get it in here close enough, and because it does have this arc here where I bend it around, it does not get in the way of my elbow when I'm swinging a piece around doing internal cuts or smaller cuts over at the scroll saw. But I did want to show you guys that on video. I'll move that aside there. Now I'm going to show you guys the angle in which the scroll saw is, and I've got a digital angle finder here. We'll turn it on and I will zero it out. There we go. And hopefully this will come up on screen. You can see right here a little more than a 16.6 degree bevel. Again, hopefully that's coming up on camera. When I had the older Delta 20-inch scroll saw over here on the area, it was at maybe an 18 degree. Again, the bevel is going to change depending on how tall you are and how tall your workbench is. I just had to play around with it. It's just up here with a few pieces of wood. As you can see back there, the scroll saw is not bolted down in any way, shape, or form. Down here you can see that I just have some pieces of wood, scrap wood, screwed into the top of the work table here, and I've got a couple screws here just in case I bump into the scroll saw, I don't knock it or it don't teeter-totter around. But it is a very smooth running machine, and it has very minimal vibration. You can see that I have the 3D printed blade alignment jig there to make sure the scroll saw is dialed in at a perfect 90 degrees. Right here I've got a couple magnets hot glued to it to where it's right at the reach. Over here I have some of the tools I use a lot. I've got a pen, of course, for marking stuff, an X-Acto knife, a piece with a very sharp point that was given to me by a fan of the channel. When I was out doing a pirate event, they give me a whole little tube of these little tools here, and I really love the sharp point there because sometimes when you're over at the scroll saw, sawdust can get caked into the pilot holes, and I can quickly use this here to also clean out the pilot holes to where I can thread the blade through for internal cutting. And it's also a good little tool to use to guide you guys through. If I'm filming a social media story, I can talk about something and really get it in there to try to show you guys what I'm talking about. Got a little file here covered in sawdust to file the backside of the scroll saw blade occasionally to get it nice and smooth. I've got just some other tools here on hand, and here is the selection of scroll saw blades I like to use. Of course, you guys know I'm a huge fan of the Shark Tooth number 5 Ultra Reverse Tooth blades, and I keep these in these little medical test tubes that I picked up off of Amazon. And this is a scroll saw blade storage caddy that is a Steve Good design. It's also an older video on this platform, but you can see I've maximized it with all of the space. And here's some more number 5 Ultra Reverse Tooth blades that I have ordered. They are right on hand. But now I'm going to show you guys some of the measurements that is featured right here. Again, keep in mind it will vary for everyone. But I've got the tape measure here, and the work stool is right at, and I'm trying to do all this one-handed, my friends, right at 32 inches. The height of the actual workbench is right at 37 and looks like 3/4 or 37 and a half. And the front lip of the scroll saw itself is right at 43 and a half. Let's see, try to back it up some one-handed. The back of the scroll saw table, and I know scroll saws come in all shapes and sizes, it's right at 13 and a half. And the second level of the workbench, and there you see the Delta 20-inch variable speed scroll saw. We're currently using the Rikon scroll saw that was provided to me through Rikon and Klingspor Woodworking Shop, and I thank them for that. But the second level of the workbench is right at 18 inches, and you can see right here we do have the foot switch. The main power cord of the scroll saw up here is snaked down behind, goes into the foot switch, and the power cable for the foot switch goes back up into the wall socket. And the foot switch was picked up at Harbor Freight. I know they have more robust and more high-end foot switches. Harbor Freight's just a local area close by, and I went and got one, and it was a game changer, and it allows for hands-free scroll sawing. And it is one of those foot switches to where when you press it down like a gas pedal on a vehicle, the scroll saw goes. When you let it up, the scroll saw turns off. So what I'll do now is turn the scroll saw on. I'm about to press the foot switch with my foot here. And as long as I am holding my foot down, the scroll saw will run, but as soon as I lift it off, the scroll saw turns off. Very good if you're doing tedious fretwork or internal cuts. You're able to keep both hands on the workpiece through all of the scrolling process, as opposed to coming up here at the switch and turning it on, turning it off, and having to hold the piece one hand while the scroll saw is still running. Here on the scroll saw arm, I do have the dust mask I'm currently using. I went through a couple of them. This one here currently I'm using is the RZ mask. They are very popular. They have the filters on the inside, if you can see that white in there, to where you can change them out once they get used up, and it does a great job of keeping the sawdust out of your lungs and everything. And my buddy Sam at Knighthood Creations give me this one with a couple filters, and it's right here to where, again, it's readily available when I sit down over at the scroll saw. You can see I have decorated the scroll saw with some stickers, Klingspor Woodworking Shop, North Carolina Woodworkers, got the Rikon logo there, nice big bold font, quality machine right here. It is a variable speed scroll saw, so you can speed it up or slow it down. And for those curious, I get asked about the speed. The speed of the scroll saw is balanced between a 7 and an 8, and I hardly ever touch it. It doesn't matter if I'm cutting out thin 1/4 inch material or thicker 1.5 inch material for compound cutting. What I'm going to do now is move the work stool over, and we will come over here, and I'm going to turn this fan off. I don't want none of that wind messing with the microphone of the camera. You can see the other side of the scroll saw, and over here I do have the little subscribe button I made over on the laser. That way when the camera is at this angle, hopefully it encourages new people to subscribe to the channel. But you guys remember when I unboxed this Rikon scroll saw, the one very minute issue I had with the scroll saw, I'm going to release the tension here, is that the arm would lock with this pin here in the back, and I am going to talk about this, but when you raise the arm up to change for internal cuttings, that pin would lock in place, and after you got done with your internal cut, you would have to reach back there each and every time to pop it, to release it, to drop the arm. I have done a very simple modification. My first quick fix, was to just take a wire. I put a board here and decorated it with an old scroll saw project video, and this little 3D printed robot, thought he looked cool. But I ran this wire down to some pulleys screwed into the workbench, drilled a hole, and then the wire goes down to this foot switch that I actually made from some scrap wood, and that would allow me to pull that pin without having to reach back there. That is a very long reach. Keep in mind, this is a 22-inch variable speed scroll saw, and I'm 6'2", and I'm standing where I traditionally sit, and you can see I would have to really lean over here and reach. But now I've done a better modification. I have tightened this bolt here that goes through the pivot of the arm for it to raise and lower. Hopefully you can see that there. And what I've done is taken, actually a friend of mine in NC Woodworkers showed me how to do this, put a zip tie in there. There's a couple small zip ties, and it's got the pin pulled all the way out, and I have tightened down on that through bolt there, again for the pivot, and now it is like a friction fit, and that pin no longer engages. So now I can do everything right here at the front, and now I can undo that wire. I did want to show it to you guys again on video, and I'm going to unscrew that homemade foot switch there. You guys do know I have a waste bucket down at my feet, and because of the angle of the scroll saw, 9 times out of 10 when I do an internal cut, the piece will just slide down the smooth surface of the scroll saw work table and drop right into the bucket. If I am cutting out a multi-part project, you guys know I'll have a little plastic parts bin off to my side, and I'll usually have it sitting over here. I'm left-handed, so naturally I want to reach to the left side, but I'll have it sitting over there, and I'll drop all the pieces in until I get done with all of the scroll saw work, and then I can come over here and then dump all of the pieces out onto the work table. I do have an old school iPod loaded with a ton of music. Music is usually the first thing I flip on when out here in the workshop. I'm a huge fan of all kinds of music, and whatever mood I'm in depicts what kind of music I will listen to. I do have it wired to an old school guitar speaker. Got everything decorated there. And then I have a stand here for my cell phone. And I like to have the cell phone facing with the screen away from me. That way I'm not distracted by notifications or anything. But it's right at hand to where I can pick it up if I want to film or take some pictures or do a quick social media story sharing a tip, trick, or tidbit. Keep my water here on a little miniature pallet coaster we made over on the laser. But this is pretty much the setup that I use for scroll saw woodworking and making beautiful and creative designs. One thing I do want to say before we close the video and put the camera back on the tripod, when I am, and you can see how that arm stays up since I tightened that bolt down, one thing I love is with this setup over here on the wall, and again I love to decorate just to look up and get inspiration and everything. I have my very first scroll saw project video sitting right there. I cut out my name, Artisan Pirate. That was back on the old 16-inch Delta scroll saw that we started the channel with, and that just stays there to remind me of how far I have came as a scroll saw woodworking artist and making videos to teach with over here on the platform. But hopefully you have found this video informative. Hopefully it wasn't too long or drawn out. What I'm going to do now is put the camera back on the tripod and we will close the video. And that, my friends, is going to about wrap up today's video. Hopefully you guys found it fun and a little informative along the way, and maybe even picked up a tip, trick, or tidbit along from the beginning of the video until now as we are getting ready to wrap up and close the video. Hopefully, again, you guys found it informative. I love teaching scroll saw woodworking. They are very versatile tools, and they can not only cut out flat two-dimensional pieces, but you can take it into the third dimension with compound cutting. And I just make basic projects over here on the platform, you know, trying to teach you guys and inspire you guys to go out in your garage or workshops and try a scroll saw. If you have never ever tried scroll saw woodworking, I encourage you guys to seek out someone who has a scroll saw, or find a woodworking club near you with someone that has a scroll saw where you can practice on. They are very therapeutic tools to use. I have been scroll sawing since I was 14 years of age. My grandfather taught me how to teach this scroll saw, and I'm now in my late 30s, and it is still the most therapeutic tool that I use out in the workshop. I can get a pattern attached to a piece of material, put on some good music, put on the ear protection, put on the dust mask, and I can get lost in the world of sawdust. I can comfortably zone out while making beautiful and creative scroll saw woodworking art, just like this tropical maritime Kenny Hopkins design that I showed you guys at the beginning of the video. And again, they are capable of so many beautiful designs, not just traditional scroll saw work like that maritime themed portrait is. You can do intarsia, you can do segmentation, you can make toys, you can make compound cuts, you can do, let's see, you can do bowls, you can do bevel cutting and make a beautiful bowl and everything. So it is capable of so many creative individual designs, and it's like I always tell you guys, there is never going to be a shortage of scroll saw woodworking projects and designs for me to bring to life visually over here on the platform for you guys to hopefully view and enjoy. But again, I just feel like it's one of my jobs to keep the scroll saw a relative tool out in a garage or workshop now that CNC's laser engravers are becoming more and more affordable. As I said at the beginning, I'm not knocking a laser or a CNC or even a 3D printer for that matter. It's just that me personally, the way my mind works, I feel like you have a more intimate relationship with the piece you are making and bringing to life when you are more hands-on at the scroll saw. It's your hands guiding the material through the blade. As I always say, take your time and let the blade do the work. But I also know that if you have a small space, if you are crunched for space, if you share a garage with an actual vehicle, you can of course get just a basic table saw, get a laser engraver, or get a small CNC machine and make beautiful and creative designs. But I also feel like the scroll saw is sometimes often overlooked and is seen as a bygone and old school and old world tool. But again, hopefully the projects that I make and bring to life over here on the platform inspire you guys to hopefully seek out and go pick up and purchase a scroll saw and get started on your scrolling journey. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions. Just drop them in the comment sections below. And I'm also happy to correspond through email and social media. If you guys want to ask me a question, if you have further questions about the setup I use over here, which scroll saw I have liked using along the way, why I have the scroll saw on an angle, or anything like that, just drop me a line on social media or down in the comments below, and I'll be happy to get back with you guys. Again, I'm trying to keep the scroll saw a relevant tool as we go forward into the digital age, and lasers and CNC machines are becoming more and more affordable. Please, my friends, do not overlook the versatility of a scroll saw. Again, they do not take up a large footprint out in a garage or workshop. And one thing to keep in mind, mine is set on the workbench. They do sell scroll saw stands, and you can put them on wheels to roll them around or take them outside if you have a nice day out in your area. It's just that this is the setup that currently works for me out in the workshop, and hopefully, in your guys' opinions, the setup that I have has produced a bunch of creative scroll saw designs for you guys to view and enjoy over here on the platform. That's going to be about all for this one. If you're new to the channel, hopefully you'll click that subscribe button and also follow me across all my social media feeds under the Artisan Pirate name. As always, links to contact me as well as all my social media feeds will always be linked down in the description box below these videos. That's about all for this one, and remember guys, if I can make it or do it, so can you guys. I'm the Artisan Pirate. Take care, and I'll see you guys real soon.